happen to believe that children that have lessons that are properly prepared, and that they're lively lessons, the way Steiner indicated, will enjoy the curriculum, period. So when I have a child that's not wanting to do school, I have to separate out, is it the material, or like, are we not in sync where they need to be? Maybe, and I've had that happen before. Maybe they're not ready for a lesson block. Maybe there's some pushback for some other reason, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Or is it that our preparation isn't right? So let's sort of sort out that, and that's different from a child that just tells you every day they're not going to do school. Because I had one of those. Totally, and that was really hard. And but we got through it. So like every single day, and I've talked about this before, every single day, my middle son, who I love immensely, would get up every morning and he would say, "Do we have to do school today?" And it would really grate on me for a while until I, really dug deeply into his temperament. He's melancholy. He's got that as a melancholy sanguine blend, and he's definitely more melancholy than sanguine, at least most of the time. And so I had to really sort of dig in there as to sort of like, what is he really asking me? What is he really struggling with? And a lot of times it can be, I mean, for some melancholies, it definitely can be like fear of like perfectionism, like I'm not going to be able to do it right. But for others, it might just be they need you to be on it and say, yeah, we're doing school. Yes, we're moving forward. And there were times when I was like, so what's up with that? Like, especially when he was older, definitely not when he was younger, but excuse me, definitely when he was older, I would be like, why are we having this conversation? And so I wanted to work in a dynamic where it wasn't struggle like this. I wanted it to be a win-win for he and I. And when I really started examining the dynamics of his temperament, my temperament, how we were working together, then it enabled me to just sort of let that roll off my back. That was like, because he would come down in the morning and his first words were not, "Hi, Mom, how are you doing? Love you. Had a good sleep. What's for breakfast?" They were, "Are we doing school today?" Like it was somehow not, like we weren't going to do school, which was really an interesting, I don't know. Anyway, so once I could get over that dynamic and really get to the root of what was going on and what his struggles were and what his arguments were for him, and he still has this issue, which kind of cracks me up. He'll learn someday, is that he just wants to do everything himself, his own way, and he's not choleric. He just has it in his head how he wants to get it done, and he has his own path to do it. Now, I get that, and I think that is an okay path when they're older, but I think that there is a time, and we have these discussions, and I would say, "Jacob, I love you, but you can't do this until you let me teach you how to do it. So once I teach you how to do it, then we can have discussions about you going off and doing it on your own." So we had to sort of come to a place where I understood sort of what his objection was, and he understood that my boundary was there, and it wasn't moving. Like, we were doing school, and once you sort of lay that down, that school is not optional. It's something that you're doing every day. You're when you're homeschooling, you've got that teacher hat on all the time, and you got to know when to take the teacher hat off and when to play. But when you're doing school at home, it's really a good idea to make sure that you have a start and an end, so that they, especially kids that push you and have struggles, so that they can calculate in their head. They can go, okay, after this time, because that was really his thing too. Is it wasn't just that he wanted to do things on his own. It's just that he had his whole day planned out, and he just, like, school was not part of that. And so, he had jumps he needed to make in the back. He had, tweaks he wanted to make to his bike. He had Legos he wanted to build. He had all these things that he wanted to do, and none of it included me. And so, once we could get to a place where he understood that my boundary was schools from here to here, then it went really well. So that's the child that fights you about school. And I'm happy to talk more about that for anybody who's really struggling with that. But I really do think, like I said, make your boundary, figure out what it is that's going on. Are they getting pushback from somebody else? Because that's another thing. If they're hearing from grandma or from dad, hey, that school that you're doing at home is really kind of crappy. You really should be in the school down the street. If they're hearing that in their head, they're going to give you pushback. So you really want to sort of sort out where that's coming from. And once you sort that out, then you can move on to the next piece. And the next piece really is, are you giving lively lessons? So if you have kids that are like, man, school is boring, I hate school. I don't have kids that say that, like, ever. And it's because I have decided I'm going to walk this Steiner path. I'm going to walk this path of Waldorf homeschooling. And in doing that, I have to provide lively lessons. And so in order to do that, I have to be ready. I have to, I have to have my planning in place. I have to have my prop drawings done for the early grades. I have to be on my game with the upper grades. I have to know the math. Like my 16-year-old, if I haven't sat down and gone through all of the math problems, she knows. But if I have sat down and gone through all the math problems, I can go, this one is an error, or there's a typo there. So here's the right answer. Or, excuse me, I'm still getting over this cold. So I can, because I've done that with her, then she knows I have credibility. If I just sort of waffle through it with her, she's like, Mom, didn't you do these problems today? So rarely, and usually now I'll warn her. I'll say, you know what, Ellie, I got so caught up in getting Sam's stuff ready today, I didn't have a chance to go through your math. So we're sort of at it together today. But that's very rare, very rare. And she struggles on those days that I don't actually take the time to do that. So I would rather not have a lesson than have a lesson done halfway. So when it comes to your other pieces, look at, what's your child's objection? Is it that if they're complaining about, doing the music part and playing the flute, is it that they're complaining about it or that they don't feel confident in it? Because those are two separate things. And that might sound the same. It might sound like, I don't want to do this. Well, does it sound like that because I'm not good at this? Is that really what they're telling you? Or, Mom, you didn't prepare? Again, if you're not there with them, if you just go practice your flute, instead of you're there with them every time, and you're there with them, sort of doing it on your own. I mean, that's one thing when you're teaching music, you need to not just buy one instrument, you need to buy two, so you both have one. And so, really thinking about those pieces. The same goes with handwork. People will tell me, oh, my child really fights me about handwork. And I go, oh, so tell me about your latest knitting project. And they're like, I go, well, that's why. If handwork isn't part of your culture, your family culture, and you've not made it part of that as part of this Waldorf journey, you cannot expect your child to pick up knitting needles and race with it. It's not going to happen. And that goes with sort of all the pieces of Waldorf. You can't sort of do the do as I say and not as I do thing. You really can't do that in parenting anyway, but especially with Waldorf, you need to be on it and you need to be ready. So now if you're just starting out and you're like, I don't even know how in the heck that's going to happen because I don't have my ducks in a row. So start with one thing, and then you build it. But you have to be ready and you have to be going and you have to be committed. You have to be, looking at your personal time. You got to be getting up before your kids, and you got to be looking at, we've talked about that before. So if you're, whine at me and say, oh, but I got this nursing baby, that doesn't keep you from waking up and laying in bed and reading what you need to read. So find a way. And we have lots of videos on sleep and lots of videos on planning. So find a way. Get your preparation done in the morning. Get up before your kids. Make sure you're done. You're ready with your lessons. That means you've played through the flute song that you're gonna introduce. That means you know the story, even if you don't have the story memorized. For grades, especially for grades 1 through 3, definitely for 1 and 2, you definitely want to make sure that 1 and 2 you either have it memorized or you're close to it. 3 is a little different, but not completely. So, I know the scripture story because we live that, so it's a little bit easier for me to sort of jump in and go, oh, this story is about Noah. I pretty much know. But you need to have gone through those stories. So even if you can't memorize, and I've talked about this in other videos before, if you're properly preparing for 1 to 2 stories a week, and we're not talking about 4 stories in a week, we're talking about 1 to 2 stories a week. So if you're properly preparing for that, then you are reading the story yourself a week in advance, letting it sleep, taking notes on it. So on the longer, so some of those fairy tales are freaking long. So on the longer ones, I would get a little 3x5 card, and I would write the main points out so that they end in order, so I didn't skip any, and I would tuck it under my leg when we were telling the story. And that way I had it, I had it there. Now, some of these fairy tales I'm on, about to be on child number 5, so I could tell some of them in my sleep, and that's the beauty of it, is that you do this repetitively, and then, it sort of sticks with you. Grade 2, those stories are fairly short. Now, when it comes to stories like, because people ask me this all the time, what about when it's an amazing storyteller, like Thornton Burgess? Now, he's got some humor in there that I could not begin to replicate. And I wouldn't want to, because then that would take away from his stories. So when it comes to stories like that, I don't memorize those. I read those. But I also have my prop ready. So I have a lesson prop, and that is the art piece. And if you're wondering about that, go back and watch our video on art in the main lesson at home and sort of get that one understood. But I've got a prop piece in front of me, or I've got props that I'm using that are maybe toys. And, excuse me. It's all right here. It's going away, but it's still there. So if you're struggling with the story piece, that's really, especially if you've got a child that's between 5 and 9, that's really got to be a big focus of yours, is getting over being afraid about the story piece and really getting to a place where you understand how to tell a story. And it's not just about the Waldorf way, it's like how to tell a story in general. And your storytelling, when you can do it for your lessons, it will grow in other areas, and you'll find yourself in a much better feeling place for the other times. So again, are you memorizing your story, or at least you know it? So there's a huge difference between a cold read, like you did 0 preparation and you're just going to sit down and read 7 Swans to your child, and then you're stumbling over some of it, or, oh no, there's like something in here that triggers me, and I get halfway through the story and I'm like, oh no, wait, I can't tell the story. And then you leave your child hanging because you didn't properly vet the story and decide what things you were struggling with, and maybe decided what things you need to tweak a little bit, how you needed to soften some things. Don't soften too much, because there's a reason that we tell fairy tales. Again, fairy tales build resiliency, so please don't forget that. But you really have to do that preparation. So that looks like, with the younger kids, it looks like really memorizing or really knowing that story. You've got your prop piece that you've already done that's going to be from your for your art. So you've got that done. And that's what preparation for school means. And those of you who are thinking Feeling Willing members, who have, access to all of our prep videos, you watch those and listen to the audios on those, because I go through step by step exactly what you need to do. You want to make sure that you have all those things in place. When you've done your homework and you've done your planning and you're ready to go, kids will not fight about lessons. They will be excited because they're lively lessons. They're fun. In 4th grade, if you just said, oh, I want you to go make a map of the neighborhood, and you didn't give them any context, or you didn't help them do it. But if you decide, we're going to make this map together, we're going to have a good time, let's go for our walk, and let's not talk during our walk. This is really hard if you've got little people. So I usually tell Soraya, this is a ninja walk. We're going to walk like ninjas. So we'll walk, and we walked the whole area that we were going to draw, and then we went home and we went right to drawing, but we did it together. And so in that case, I didn't have a prop in front of him. I just sort of had it. I actually showed Sam his sisters, his older sisters, when we did her lesson block, and one of the boys, the older boys. And that way he could see sort of what we were going to be doing. They were different neighborhoods, like for all 3 of the big kids. So it wasn't like he could copy and go, hey, I need to do it like Ellie's. Nope, we had to do our own. So that was a project that took us a week, but we worked on it together every day. And so you really have to be into it. And people say, well, how do you do that with a bunch of kids? Well, you plan for it. So on those weeks, The things I was doing with Ellie were less intense. Things I was doing with Soraya were less intense. So you really have to know your lesson planning, and that means you have to have gone through the curriculum more than one time. You have to have read through it. You have to have planned it. And so you go, okay, this is a really intense week for my third grader. So it cannot be an intense week for my fifth grader, my first grader. So how do I rearrange some things there? So, what maybe your fifth grader is doing more reading that week or more art that week, and you're doing less main lesson that's super intense. So you have to sort of figure those things out, and it becomes almost like a chess game. So you're just like moving pieces where they need to go. And some people might say, gosh, that's a lot of work. It is, but you signed on for this for a reason. You love Waldorf education and you want to bring it home. So, there's some ways you can cut corners, but they're not corners that I would cut that would then have a child say they don't like the lessons. I would rather have just a flute lesson, or just a painting lesson, or just your main lesson, or just a knitting lesson, and have that one lesson be 100% awesome, than have 5 parts of your day that were kind of crappy. Because kind of crappy is not like how they're going to be exciting and thriving and excited for school. My kids asked to do school on Saturday and Sunday, and I'm like, people, we're taking a break. It's the weekend. Mom gets so, and they always have. Even my child that struggled and fought me every day. Once he was doing school, once we were in school, he was like, yay, I love this. So it was the act of getting him to there. So if you're really having struggles with, my kid doesn't want to do school, or we're really struggling with this, I would step back and I would look at the bigger picture and say, am I prepared? Am I centered? How is my inner work? Is my inner work in a place that when they say things that are maybe not nice to mom, that I'm not going to blow up? Or am I freaking out at every little thing? If you're freaking out at every little thing, then you have to step back and ask yourself why, and figure out where the breakdown is. Is it in your sleep? Is it in your spiritual prep? Is it in your marriage? Is it where is it? And is it in all of those things? And if it's in all of those things, then you need to join one of our programs and let me help you with that. But you really got to break those things down and figure out what the struggles are so that you can move forward and do this and have a fun time with it. And again, even if you only get in one amazing lesson a week and the rest of the time you're just knitting, or the rest of the time you're just, it's still amazing. And so that's really what you want to focus on. You want to focus on awesome lessons, not lessons that are halfway, not lessons where you're checking off the box and you're trying to hurry up through it. You don't want to go, it's almost 2 o'clock and we have not done music yet. You don't want to do that. That sort of gives your kids a sense of urgency and anxiety that you don't want to have around school. I would rather block things off, and I'll say that today we are just going to do handwork. And then we did that last week when we're all sort of finding the ick. Now I'm the only one still finding it, but I said, this is a handwork and reading week. And my kids were like, oh, great. And so they knew. They had an expectation. They knew. I told them Monday morning that I wanted it to be slower for the week, and it worked out that way. But if you don't give them an expectation, then they don't know. And when kids don't know what's going on, that's when they fight you. That's when they get in trouble. That's when they fight their siblings. They need to have that security of knowing what's going on. So you got to look at your rhythm. You have to see things coming in advance. Last Saturday when Soraya was starting to feel yucky and I knew it was coming, nobody else was feeling nasty, but I was mentally preparing. I was mentally thinking, all right, if this starts to make the domino effect, which happens in large families usually, if this makes the rounds, then what is our week going to look like? And I start thinking about that, when the first child is sick. I don't wait until the third person is sick to go, oh, wait a minute, we're in chaos. No, when the first person starts to get ill and you start to feel that scratchy throat, that's when you go, okay, it's time to put some chicken soup on, it's time to get some garlic in all of us, or whatever it is that you do for your family to boost immunity. That's when you start to do it. You don't do it when you're on person number 3. And so you start to do it on the first person, and then you start to think about the week you have ahead and really adjust it. So do you need to adjust lessons? Because, see, one of the things was it really kept Sam up. There was one night he didn't go to sleep till 3 a.m. I couldn't expect him to do math the next day. So you really want to be able to have that foresight when you're seeing, when things are starting, that you can see sort of what your week ahead. And that means you know what your week ahead is. That means you can look in your plans that you've written and okay, I'm going to need to move this because there's no way they're going to want to feel like doing math this week. Because especially like this was a head cold. So when you have a head cold and it feels like you have cotton in your head, the last thing you want to do is try to stick numbers in there and get the numbers to work. So I knew that, and I wanted to sort of bring everybody to a peace without that. So I want you to really be thinking about those things. I know it seems like a lot to juggle. I know it does, but you can do it. You have to order your days, and you have to decide what's really important to you. And when you make those decisions, great things happen for you. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you go on to have wonderful lessons all week long. And if you're looking at your lesson plan going, oh, I can't teach today, then don't. Then use part of today, use your quiet time today to make sure that tomorrow is an awesome lesson. And today, maybe you get out and build snowmen if you're in the snow still, or go for walks and clean your house, declutter, but get everybody involved in doing it together. So there is no fighting. When mom leads, people don't fight so much. When mom doesn't lead and hold the space, fighting happens. So you can do this, and I have confidence in you. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.